we will take questions for any clarity. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muloto, and good afternoon to you, ladies and gentlemen of the media. I think the statement will be circulated once it's been properly cleaned up. And as usual, I prefer to rather talk to the statement than read it, especially because we work on the statement until the last minute we come here. As Mr. Muloto has said, we will be presenting the budget vote 2. And the theme of the budget vote for this year is celebrating 20 years of the Constitution and 20 years since the establishment of the NCOP. As you see, the NCOP is not represented here this afternoon, and I believe they will rather talk to yourselves after having presented and debated the vote in the House of the provinces. We will also be presenting the strategic plan and the annual performance plans of Parliament tomorrow. And that is in line with Section 16.1 of the Financial Management of Parliament and Provincial Legislatures Act, which is the act that directs us as to how best to manage the finances that we procure from the fiscus. Ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow we will have in the gallery among our guests, sadly, members of families of victims of the femicide that has been riddling our communities in the recent past. So we've invited just a few of them to share a different environment, you know, just so they get a sense also of how we as the people's representatives also care and feel their pain as we speak to that particular issue of that challenge of the killings that have been in the air, in the public domain. We will, among things we will touch upon will be what we got from the preliminary report we got as the Speakers Forum, representing the legislative sector. The Speakers Forum meaning the speakers of all the provinces together with the presiding officers of Parliament. We got a preliminary report from which one of the working groups, Working Group 2, unfortunately highlights to us what little progress we've made in land reform. That will be one of the issues that the budget speech will touch upon, which for us is a matter of great concern. Otherwise, there is good progress towards realizing the 5 priorities of the 5th Democratic Parliament as reflected in our strategic vision that we presented at the beginning of the 5th Parliament. We will touch on the issue also that the fact that we are marking the 20 years of the Constitution. We will touch on the separation of powers issue, which also has been playing out in the public domain in terms of what has been referred to by other people as a judicial overreach. Well, we will simply share our own experience in this regard. But we believe that it's a very important principle that right as we set out on this journey 20 years ago of building a democratic dispensation, was highlighted through a specific constitutional principle. Lastly, I wish to mention a large area of discussion and engagement between us and Treasury. Again, this being done together with the rest of the legislative sector represented by the leaders of the Speakers Forum of each provincial legislature, whereby the difficulties that have been experienced in the past 20 years in conjunction with engaging with Treasury, I believe we've really broken the back of a large part of that, because at the end of last year, we had started what we think was the most constructive engagement with Treasury, to share with them, to understand the constitutional mandate of the legislative sector, and therefore how we believed the approach to the budgeting cycle at a national level had to shift based on that understanding, which clearly had lacked before. We have made progress because we have even come to a point where there is agreement in principle about how to intervene to make sure that as the mandating committee or structure of the executive starts off a budgeting cycle, they already have in mind that it is necessary to accommodate the legislative sector, not as if it is just another ministry, but that it is an arm. We are saying that we are finding that our colleagues on the other side are beginning to have a different understanding, and therefore, although things might not have shifted such that we would be ready in this budget, this current year, that we would in future, in the near future, as we start a new cycle, improve things most fundamentally, and therefore improve the budget of Parliament and the legislatures. We also believe it helps the legislatures, because remember, we here in Parliament have to also play a leadership role in terms of the structure that brings all of us together as a legislative sector. So we are saying there are definite shifts, and we think we are beginning to move forward, although the current year is in very, very serious trouble in general. Just to, to say that we are victims of the previous cuts, very, very serious cuts. But we hope that very soon things will change. I think I'll allow my colleague, Mr. Lichisa, to add to my briefing.
No, I think you've done it, ma'am. I think that's okay. Yes. Yeah, you covered all. We'll
Over
take
to you, Mr. Mloto.
Okay. Thank you, Speaker. As the Speaker has said, we have got a comprehensive statement which will ensure that it is forwarded to your emails through the contact list that we normally communicate with you. So that statement will be forwarded to you as soon as we are done with this media briefing. And for now, I think let's have an opportunity for any clarity-seeking questions. Okay, you'll be 1, 2, 3 in that order. Is there any other question? You'll be the fourth, and then the fifth at the back. That will be the first round.
Good afternoon, Bianca Capozorio from the Times Media Group. Speaker, you mentioned how bad the financial situation is this year, and I know in previous engagements you've mentioned that as well. The Nahawu has indicated that there might be retrenchments. Can you comment on that, on the fact that the salary bill is bigger than the amount of money that you've been allocated?
Jan Geiber, News 24. My impression is over the last few months that Parliament has strengthened its oversight role, but one of the problems is that some ministers still doesn't attend committees and question times, and are not available when for member statements, for responses to member statements. Is there something being done from Parliament's side to improve the ministers' attendance of these things? Thanks.
Okay, the third, I think it was you, Mkwanazi.
Good afternoon, it's Yabonga Mkwanazi from Independent Media. Speaker, just wanted to find out on this question of judicial overreach. You're raising this question now, is it perhaps because of the number of cases that are before the courts against Parliament? You know, quite a couple of cases over the last 2 or 3 years. And what sort of mechanisms, if you can just give us an insight that you're looking at to resolve this issue, because because opposition parties feel that they don't get joy from Parliament and they resort to the courts.
And there was, were you the last one, Mr. Msi? Oh yes, you are the fourth, and then you'll be the fifth. Yeah.
Yeah, Speaker, connected to the question that was previously asked, it's on the issue of the workers of Parliament. I see that there is a kind of a protest outside about salaries, to do with salary increases. What is being done to address that particular issue of assuring the workers about their salaries, because apparently they've been told they're not going to get an increase at all?
Hi, Chantal Presence from the African News Agency. I'm partly covered by some of my colleagues. Just also on the Nauru issue, can you just tell us how far that is? And now I was saying they've had 2 or 3 meetings with parliamentary management, and that's hit a deadlock, and they're pinning their hopes on the presiding officers to intervene, because they say they won't accept a 0% salary increase. Just your comment on that.
Okay, ma'am.
Let me skip the salary bill issues and the issues of salaries and leave it to the accounting officer, Mr. Mgildana. But just to say, we are, of course, as presiding officers, appraised of the situation, the issues that are being engaged on between management and the workers. And we put in a word or two, but largely it's a matter that is in the hands of the secretary and his colleagues. We are hopeful that it cannot be that we settle for a 0% increase. That is our general outlook. On the issue of ministers that don't attend committee meetings or meetings where they are expected, it's an issue that is on an ongoing basis on the agenda of engagement between ourselves as presiding officers and the leader of government business, so that it is his role and responsibility to, again, all the time have an item on the agenda of the cabinet where he raises these issues. If sometimes we raise even specific names of ministers where there have been reports that committees are complaining, he would then actually make sure that he engages those particular ministers. So it's a matter really that we seek to improve, and sometimes it's just perhaps some people not understanding what is at stake, and the fact that generally politicians, even MPs themselves, always have a lot on their plate generally. So people end up tripping over themselves about what to do and what not to attend to in a very, very hectic schedule. But it's a matter that we don't leave without attending to it in terms of raising it with the proper channels, and that is the Office of the Leader of Government Business and the Leader of Government Business himself. On the issues relating to the separation of powers, I can only say, of course, the constitutional principle and the Constitution itself provides for how we each have our own roles and our own place within the state structure. But, you know, it can be said that it is a problem that emanates mainly in Parliament itself, where for political reasons, MPs will leave Parliament knowing that there are structures here, there are channels here, these matters can be threshed through, and they take them to court. And my own take on why is that it's for political reasons, and it's also because they can afford it, they have the money, so they rush to the courts, and therefore you have this tendency, this habit that has grown, I think, in the 5th Parliament. As to why in the 5th Parliament, your guess is as good as mine. There are people who were not here before the 5th Parliament. There are ideas and a way of doing things that's different in the 5th Parliament. It's a different combination of people that are here and how they see the best way of doing things within the political sector. Secretary, I think deal with the issue of salaries. You want to come in? Yes. Deputy Speaker is reminding me. You, ladies and gentlemen of the media, are aware of a meeting that took place sometime last year of the heads of the 3 arms. This issue was raised there. We were at Genadendal. We started to engage on this matter, but unfortunately, due to diaries that just keep clashing, we have not had a follow-up meeting where we had hoped to each have a bigger delegation of each of the arms so that we can all share perspectives, look at things from all angles, and see how best we can do justice to the constitutional order itself by sticking to the letter and the spirit of the principles that underpinned the provisions of the Constitution. And it's an appropriate year because it's the year when we are indeed reflecting on the journey of 20 years of the Constitution.
Thank you very much, Speaker, and good afternoon. On the issue of the possible question on possible retrenchments, the salary increases, I think the appropriate way to address this is to pick up on the point that was made earlier on by the Speaker that talks to the funding of Parliament as a whole. And the second one is on the fact that, as you would know, that in most, or if not all, state institutions, we have had cuts, and Parliament also was affected in that space. And part of the cuts, of course, would have affected the compensation of employees. We have in this regard shared this information throughout the years, last year, this year, with staff and in particular with labor. We are currently engaged in negotiations with labor to look at ways and means of finding solutions along the lines that are indicated by the speaker. We are not quite there, as far as I know, in terms of finding any solutions, but we're looking at various options in this regard. So I think any statement that would then say Parliament has issued a position or a proposal on retrenchment would be wrong and unfounded. And the second one on indicating that there are no salary increases, that would also be wrong. What is there is that we are looking at the various options that are there. And as far as we know, those options have not been closed. Thanks.
I wish to add that it would not be our wish not to have any increase of salaries of staff. That's not our policy.
Thank you, Speaker. Can we go for the second round? You want the second bite, Mr. Musia? And I'm short-sighted, so I can't see your face. So you'll be the second one. So it's only 2 for this last round. Okay.
Okay, Speaker, I realize this one is not necessarily, strictly speaking, budget related, but it is something that's happening at Parliament. The DA held a media briefing this morning, and one of the things they spoke about was that they have written to you to ask for a committee to probe issues of state capture. And I was wondering if you are willing to comment on that particular issue. And on the issue of overreach, judicial overreach, I just want to understand what it means when opposition parties feel or say that in Parliament they raise issues but because they do not have the numbers, they're just defeated because the ruling party uses a majoritarian approach, so that whatever issue you raise, then it's going to, even if it's unconstitutional, like adopting the report on Nkandla, for instance, which the Constitutional Court then found to be unconstitutional, then they have no way if they are going to be overruled by majority. What do you say to that?
Good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Lukanya Thalat. It's Lukanya Molot over here. Thank you very much. Joseph has, to a very large extent, covered me. However, I just wanted to double check on a few things, ma'am. Firstly, the budget that you will be tabling tomorrow, how much is it actually? What is the actual amount that you'll be tabling? And then secondly, with the issue of cuts and budgetary cuts that Mr. Mkidlana just mentioned, there are parliamentary staff, senior parliamentary staff, that continue to be on suspensions today. So I would just like to know what exactly is what's the latest on those suspensions. I think one of them is the former head of security. I mean, if Parliament is having budget cuts and yet I think Ms. Holtzman continues to be on suspension, I think earning still her full pay. What's the latest with regards to her disciplinary processes and even her deputy as well? Thank you very much.
So that was the last round. Questions from 2 journalists here.
My take on the issue of what's going to happen to the issue of state capture, I believe it is desirable to have a commission of inquiry to all matters relating to state capture broadly, so that we can settle our minds and get on with our lives. For now, there's nothing, but there will be. You are saying, eh? It means there will be a structure that will probe into whatever you understand by state capture in its broadest meaning and what effect it has had on South African society over time. And of course, when that structure is formed, it will then determine its time frames, its detailed terms of reference. I think we will all sleep well once we all know that we are having some people paying attention to this monster, so that we can all get on with the life of South Africa. My take on opposition going to courts on the basis that there's a majority and therefore they are going to lose anyway, I don't think that's the way to work. I think we've all, in the first 3 parliaments that I was part of, we always had the majority and we always worked together. We talked to one another, we persuaded one another, we listened, we engaged until we found the best position on whatever the issues that we were dealing with. This business of taking parliamentary issues, including internal detailed arrangements, I think is not very, very good for us. Because we run away from engaging. We run away from dealing with issues. And we rather go and well, I guess we can afford it. Those that go that route go to courts. So that's my take. How much is the budget that we are? It is 2.2 billion. Yo, I'm afraid of those kinds of figures. 2.2 billion. We had asked for 2.9 billion. So that's what we're being given. The suspension of Zelda is going to be dealt with by Mr. Mkhitlane. And of course, Deputy.
With regard to the matter of Mr. Mokhatle, the contract terminated at the beginning of the year. Ms. Holzman, that matter is currently in the process of discipline. Both parties, I think, are engaged. There's an independent chair. Both parties have appointed legal representatives who are engaging with the matter. It's still ongoing. Of course, on our side, we would want to see it resolved as quickly as possible. But on our side, we can put a timeline on an independent chairperson.
Okay.
Sorry,
All right. I thought that it was the final round, but let's take the final round, seeing that you want follow-ups. Let's begin with the person. Yeah, no. Let's begin with you, and then we'll take. Okay, before you come in, let's the Deputy Speaker clarify something.
Yes. On the question that the Speaker responded to, it was in reference to the whether it's judicial inquiry on state capture and so on, as she said, whenever that is going to happen. The letter that is referred to has not reached Parliament yet. And also that only the House can establish whatever committee that it needs to do if there is such a request that comes through when that happens. But for now, we haven't received the letter. That's the clarification we needed to make in case you assume that the Speaker is already establishing one. She is not. Yeah.
Okay, let's take the most final round of the most final. Okay, Mr. Galata, from a distance you look like Mr. Magubani, so that's why I didn't want to make a mistake. But you can start and then followed by. You are both dark bones.
Thank you. Thanks for the honor. I think he's incredibly good looking. So for me to look like him is, thank you very much. Thank you. Just an issue of clarity, please, Mr. Mkhilan. Okay, Mr. Mokhatle, you say the contract terminated at the beginning of the year. How long was he on suspension for before the contract was ran out its time? And Ms. Holtzman, how long has she been on? On suspension? Considering, I mean, that she's been. I think it's probably been over a year. And if I may, ma'am, doesn't it bother you? I mean, at the end of the day, you're the one of the presiding officers to have your former head of security been on suspension for such a long time. And I mean, I don't know what Mr. Mgidlana tells you about the resolution of that case, but I mean, if I were in your position, I would be incredibly upset that somebody that senior and something that's been happening for such a long time, there's still no resolution to it. Thanks very much.
I am upset.
Okay.
Why are you upset, man?
No, look at. He said, "I'm the presiding officer. I'm not going to allow the dialogue." Okay, Paul.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker. Paul Vecchiato from Bloomberg. Just talking about inquiries, the Public Enterprises Committee have also asked, or indicated they're going to ask permission to have an inquiry into Eskom. There was also talk of having an ad hoc committee similar to the SABC ad hoc committee. Could you tell me if those requests have come through and if they have been approved or you expect them to?
We haven't received those requests. We'll deal with them as soon as we get them. Thanks.
Okay, and then the last.
Just an issue of clarity. Earlier when you spoke about the Commission of Inquiry, were you talking about the Judicial Commission of Inquiry, or is Parliament likely to set up its own inquiry? If you can just clarify for me.
I thought the Deputy Speaker has clarified that one, but I think he can. I know he's very patient. He can.
The reference was to the question that was asked, whether there was going to be a judicial inquiry, and the Speaker reckoned, of course, that would be absolutely helpful, that any such structure that will inquire into the state capture issues is absolutely welcome. But that's not going to happen. We haven't received anything inside Parliament, and you know that that issue is in the state capture report itself. How and when that happens depends on the response to the affected.
No, I think it's well covered. Secretary.
Okay.
Oh.
On the issue of how long the process has taken, of course the process has taken long, and you wouldn't want any disciplinary process to take on that long a process. But what we have to bear in mind is once we have established a process which has its chairperson and legal representatives who are raising issues, pertinent issues in that inquiry, in a way, as accounting officer, I can't interrupt that process, you know, unless there is something unlawful going on in that space.
No, thank you very much, Speaker. Thank you, Deputy Speaker and Secretary to Parliament. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming. As we have said, the statements will be shortly emailed to all your email contact. And the budget vote 2 of Parliament is scheduled for tomorrow in the National Assembly. Yes, and the NCOP at the same time. So it will be presented and debated in both houses. Thank you.